Hosea chapter 1, verse 1, as God calls Hosea. We've been looking over the past few weeks. We looked at Ezekiel and Daniel and Jeremiah, and we talked about them all down in that southern part, and how they had freedom when Jeremiah's preaching and saying, listen, repent, and how he was unsuccessful. And then we looked at Daniel being taken and talked about him and living kind of in the lap of luxury, but not in the lap of luxury, because that isn't what his life and his calling about. And Ezekiel being a captive, witnessing. He witnessed to the Jews in captivity, and Daniel's witnessing to Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. And Jeremiah had prophesied and witnessed to them all, and he's living down in Jerusalem. Well, we're going to back up. We're going to jump back at the time that Isaiah was the prophet down in that area before Jeremiah and before Ezekiel and before Daniel. And we looked at Isaiah back quite some time. He was down there. He was the prophet. But up north, we're going to travel up north to find who was prophesying up there before the Assyrian army overtook the northern kingdom. By the way, the northern kingdom is where most of the tribes are. Most of them are up there. And this battle will continue on till Jesus' day. Remember the woman at the well, right? And I preached about her Sunday, but whenever she's talking to Jesus, she says, well, your people say we worship at the temple, but ours say we worship here on the mountain. That's that division. That's the north and the south, right? So this continues, this civil war, this split in the nation of Israel and Judah for centuries, for years and years and years. But before it ever really, when they got split, before either kingdom was taken over, Isaiah was prophet down in Judea. And Hosea is called to be the prophet up in the northern kingdom. And the northern kingdom's in different circumstances. God knows that the Assyrian army is marching down, and they will take over that land long before Babylon will come and take over the south and the north. So God's working through Hosea, trying to get them to listen, to repent, because a judgment that has been promised is coming. And so we find out a lot real early when we look at the first verses of Hosea. So let's just read a few verses and kind of go from there. It says, the word of the Lord came into Hosea, the son of Beeri, in the days. He's going to give us a whole list of kings that are kings of the southern kingdom. All these are kings down south during Isaiah's reign. Here they are. King Uzziah, Joram, Ahaz, Hezekiah, kings of Judea. He gives us all those kings. Them are kings of the southern kingdom of Judea. And in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel. That's the king that he will serve under. Okay? King Jeroboam. The beginning of the word of the Lord by Hosea. And the Lord said to Hosea, go take unto thee a wife of whoredoms, and children of whoredoms, for the land hath committed great whoredom, departing from the Lord. And so went he and took Gomer, the daughter of Dilaim, which conceived and bare him a son. And the Lord said unto him, call his name Jezreel for yet a little while, and I will avenge the blood of Jezreel upon the house of Jehu, and will cause to cease the kingdom of the house of Israel. Or in a little while, the house of Israel is going to fall. The nation of Israel, the northern kingdom, is going to fall, and God is going to avenge whatever Jehu did in the valley of Jezreel. And it came to pass at that day that I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. And so let's stop there. And that may be all we get discussed tonight. So, what happened? Who is Jehu, and what is the prophecy, and what's leading all the way up to Hosea being asked to take a wife? And we'll discuss that a little bit. Whoredoms, okay? What's going on? Jehu, under Elijah, was part of a coup that, if you go back in Kings, Elijah and Elisha kind of encouraged to overthrow what is the rottenest of rotten kings, and who has the most famous evil wife in the world yet today. What's her name? Jezebel. King Ahab and Jezebel are ruling Israel, and Elijah comes on and says, listen, and encourages, there's a fall, there's all kinds, the kingdom's weakened, Ahab, and he is encouraged to join in and overthrow Ahab. And he does. And so you can go back in Kings and read the terrible story of what happened to Jezebel and all of that. It's terrible, but deserving. You talk about evil. You read those stories. Ahab and Jezebel are evil. So Jehu seems to be a hero, and he kind of is, until he makes a deal later. Okay, he kind of backs off of when the kingdom is taken over, and he makes a deal with the new king to bring him the 70 sons of Ahab and Jezebel. And he kills all 70 of them and cuts off their heads in the valley of Jezreel. And God says, or the prophecy is, that the fourth generation, there'll be 4 generations, that will be avenged. That was not tolerable. That was not allowed. God did not encourage that. Elijah did not encourage that. Jehu went on his own, and he said, Israel will pay for this at the 4th generation of kings. Jeroboam in Hosea is the king of the 4th generation. So it's time. Time has come to pay the price for the evil that's done. God calls, and he says, listen, I'm going to use Assyria. That king's going to come down, and Israel in the valley of Jezreel by the bow and arrow is going to fall. And great is going to be the fall. The kingdom's going to lose. Why? Well, because the time has come to pass, but we're going to learn a whole lot more about Israel. Israel has turned terribly away from God. Terribly away. I don't want anything to do with God. And so when we read, God says, so Hosea, I'm going to have you model this. I'm going to have you model what Israel's doing to me. So the time's come for them to fall. Israel's going to fall under your leadership, as I have prophesied. But I want you to model their life, because I have been good to them. And Israel, you know, you're kind of thinking, oh, so they're poor. No, they are at the top of the game. They are living it up. It's kind of in the days of Noah. And they've left God out. God blessed them and gave them crops gave them things, and they took those things and they sacrificed and they gave them to foreign gods, and they made foreign gods, and they've left him. And if you read Hosea, you read all of this, and we'll look at a little bit of that. So he said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to model that for me. Now, there's a lot of debates, because what we got is a prostitute in the picture here. Did God say to Hosea, go marry a prostitute? Well, that's questionable, because if you go back to Leviticus chapter 21, verse 7, God forbids a priest or a prophet to marry a prostitute. So it's hard to believe that he's absolutely saying, go marry a prostitute. I think what he's saying is kind of like your parents. He lives in the land of prostitutes. He lives in the land. And so he says, go and marry. He knows that Hosea's going to need a wife. And he's saying, a prostitute. She is going to be a prostitute. She's going to be bent towards prostitution. She's going to break your heart. She's going to model everything Israel's did. Is she already in prostitution? I doubt it very much. According to Scripture, I don't think she is. But God's saying she will be. So he goes and he looks, he chooses. And he chooses a girl named Gomer. I don't know how I did that. Now, in fairness, they didn't have Gomer Pyle in that day, so, you didn't laugh so hard. That's the only person I can think of when I think of Gomer. I'm going, oh my goodness, Shazam, he married her. You got to be kidding. So, he finds a girl named Gomer and he marries her. I want to say, marriage is a sacred thing. It always has been. From the very beginning, God made them, male and female, right? He gave Eve to Adam. God doesn't take marriage lightly. That relationship is important. And sometimes, even in really rough marriages, good things come, right? There's good things. Sometimes, I know Juanita Shaner lived with a man that wasn't a Christian. And she faithfully went to church. And she so wanted him to come to the Lord. He wasn't a bad guy, but I watched her heart break, and I wondered sometimes, did she ever wish she had married someone else? Did she ever wish she married someone that went to church with her? I loved him to death. Great guy. Later in life, when she couldn't drive to church, he would take her to church. Go home, come back and get her, pick her up. Why Wilford never come to church? I don't know. It was my hope them talks in the garden, will Wilford one day weighed on his mind. He didn't reject the Lord. I really think it was something to do more with church than it was with God when I would talk to him and Jesus. I think it was church itself that Wilford kind of didn't care for. No one really knows sometimes, but I wondered and I watched, because I'm talking from the time I was a kid until the time I did his funeral. Years later, I was in Brown County. Wilford never ever went, and Juanita never ever missed. But Wilford did something for Juanita. It wasn't a bad marriage. You pick one area sometimes, you look, and you got to be careful. Because I think Gomer did things for Hosea that God knew Hosea was going to need. And she's going to devastate him. But God chooses to use this model to witness to Israel. And I think there's a benefit in it for Hosea. I think he loves Gomer. When he went and picked her, I think he loves her with all of his heart. And he brings her home, and they have a child. And they name that child Jezreel. Right? The boy, Jezreel, because God's going to, the time is short. right? And so he names his first son Jezreel. Right after that, they have a girl, Hannah, and her name stands for God saying, I will have no more mercy upon the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away. But he will have mercy on Judea. Remember, Israel gets overtaken. Judea doesn't. Assyria stops at that line. He has mercy on Judea. And then he has one more. Then God said, call his name son. Lo am I, for you are not my people, and I will not be your God, or his last son. All three children's names are related to the relationship between God and them. That's all through the Old Testament. Names meant something. I'm not sure what we shouldn't be more particular about names today. When we name, and give some thought what those names mean when we name, or that we shouldn't at least give thought for our child's sake, so we could explain and say, listen, we named you, and we named you this reason. You're a bright star because and so you give them that special purpose, that beginning, that they're, early with the name. It was very important in biblical times. So they have these three children, and then in chapter 2 is the sad story of her leaving. She leaves him, she leaves the kids, and she goes out on the streets into prostitution. And it's a long, drawn-out story in chapter 2. And anything he can do. He can't make her come back, He can't make her stay. And that hurts. There isn't anything that's, marriages can take about anything but infidelity. I said that wrong, didn't I? But cheating. It's hard to recover. It's the ultimate hurt. It's the ultimate break of trust. She's not gone out and cheated on him with a man. She's gone out and cheated on him with a new man every night, after night, after night. And he's raising the three kids at home. How long do you think before his anger is at a burning hot height? Probably not too long. Chapter 3, God says to him, Then said the Lord unto me, Go yet, love a woman, beloved of her friend, and an adulteress, according to the love of the Lord toward the children of Israel, who look to other gods and love flagons of wine. So I brought her to me. God says, go get her. He goes out and he finds her, and he has to buy her back. The price is 15 pieces of silver. The price of a slave in that day and time was 30 pieces of silver. There's a story there. She's not worth the price of the slave to whoever owns her. Her life's at that point, that place. When she left, I'm sure she was at the height of it all. Beauty, popularity, everything. That's all gone. The owner of her no longer sees anything to sell, anything to profit. He sells her dirt cheap to Hosea. And Hosea buys her. And God says, buy her, bring her home, love her the way I loved Israel, so that the world can see. Don't just go buy her and bring her home and make her miserable and make her pay. Bring her home and love her the way I love Israel. By the way, that's the way God tells us to love our wife, right? Love your wife as God has loved the church. Same command. Still the same command. Why? Because it's such a special relationship. When you're looking at this Hosea, you're looking at a very, very intimate calling that God calls Hosea into. When we get married, we say what? Do you remember? For better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. There is no other vow like that in the world. No other vow. When we get married in the church before God, we make that vow. That's an unbelievable vow to be made. So God uses this, and he brings Hosea to be a witness. In chapter 4, verse 6, we will look real quick. If we'll run through just a few verses here to look at where Israel had gotten. So if you turn to chapter 4, verse 6, it says, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I also reject thee, that thou hast no priest to me, seeing thou hast forgotten the law of God, I will also forget thy children." Or not only was it time for Jehu in the valley of Jezreel and the Syrian army to come, but Israel's ripe for it. Why? Because they're ignorant. There's a lack of knowledge. And I think that's talking spiritually of God. There's a lack of knowledge in the land. Chapter 5, verse 5 says, "And the pride of Israel doth testify to his face. Therefore shall Israel and Ephraim fall in the iniquity. Judea also shall fall with them." By the way, Ephraim's another name for Israel. But pride, not only are they ignorant, so to speak, they're prideful. They're an arrogant group. They're an arrogant nation, it says in that chapter. In chapter 6, verse 11, it says, "Also, O Judea, he hath a harvest for thee, when I return the captivity of my people." I got the wrong verse there, don't I? 6:11. Where is it? Oh, 4, verse 4. "O Ephraim, what shall I do unto thee? O Judea, what shall I do unto thee? For your goodness is as a morning cloud, and as an early dew, it goeth away." Or they had some goodness, but it didn't last long. It was like a passing cloud or the dew in the morning. "Therefore have I hewed them by the prophets. I have slain them by the words of thy mouth, and the judgments are as the light that goeth before them." Let's see. Verse 9, chapter 9, verse 9 says, "They have deeply corrupted themselves as of the days of Gilead. Therefore he will remember their iniquity and will visit their sins." Or they are a corrupt nation. And 11, verse 7, I think I got it, 11, verse 7. "And my people are bent to backsliding from me. Though they called them to the Most High, none at all would exalt him. How shall I give thee up, Ephraim? How shall I deliver thee, Israel? How shall I make thee as Admah? How shall I set thee as Zebulun? My heart is turned within me. My repenting are kindled together." Or God says, I'm done. I'm done. When you look at the nation of Israel, you find that they are politically corrupt. Their kings are corrupt. They don't last long. There's after Jeroboam dies, his son takes over. He's assassinated, I think, within 6 months. His predecessor only lasts 3 months, and they come in and they kill him. It's a land politically where you can come and you can assassinate kings and you can take over. Socially, it's a wreck. The whole nation is prideful and arrogant and rejecting God and doing anything that is contrary to God. Religiously, There are no religious leaders. Hosea's on the scene. He's it. And so God says, it is time and the land will fall. And it does fall. Hosea is a unique guy. I think sometimes we look at, because he is one of the minor prophets, and we skip over those 14 chapters of a man that really, really chooses and serves God. He just serves him in that northern kingdom, which isn't as a big a part of the history as the southern kingdom was, or Jerusalem and all that is. That's up there with Samaria and all of that. But he's a unique leader, and there's a lot of lessons to be learned by his life. He's living in a country that is politically wrecked, socially devastated, religiously lost, and he goes home every night to a home that couldn't be more wrecked. I know sometimes he's got to get on his knees at night and look and say, God, I live with this all day long. When I'm out in the streets, I see this everywhere in everyone. But to come home to it, to my own wife gone, to my own family, to live with it in your own home, that's a lot. He's a man of character. He stands the test of time. He's a great prophet. And he probably deserves a lot more attention than we give him. Any questions? Any thoughts? Is that too much stuff? That's a lot. It's a lot to try to cover in a week. So, and you'll hear him mention Sunday, because I'm going to try to take do my Bible studies and then try to find a New Testament mirroring kind of story to preach on the Sundays after for a few weeks. So I got a couple ideas when I was working on this for a Sunday sermon. So
I wonder, Israel today is probably a lot like Israel then. The religious, they're proud to be Jews, but really what kind of relationship do they have with God?
yeah, it's sad to see how much they love the rituals of everything. I mean, when we're over there, and God bless you, couldn't love or want anyone to be more faithful to the things you got to do to love God than Slow-Mo and the people that are teaching and working with us. I mean, if it's a ritual, if it's something that's supposed to be done, and they do it. But you don't see the heart. It's all mental with them. You don't see the heart for God when they're standing there and showing you all these things, Now, this is holy, but you don't sense that feeling of holiness. You try to talk to him about Jesus. I love that, what I mean? Is exciting. I had some really good times talking for moments with Slow-Mo about Jesus and the resurrection and that type of thing. And the only emotion I ever seen out of him never came from his God. It came from the Holocaust and an aunt that died in the Holocaust. He'd had an aunt, and he wrote a book about that. And when he talked about that, he cried. And you seen that there was emotion, but no emotion about God.
They love their country.
They do.
And their Bible. And I know they love God, but that's what comes across. Their passion for the Bible, their passion for their country.
Yeah.
But you don't see a lot of, and maybe it's because of the rituals that,
Yeah.
that is it's a heavy
And it's a brief time we're there. We're there for a few weeks, running through and hanging out with these guys, but long, long hours of the day. I mean, and it's amazing to listen to the songs and the things they sing, Lord, and their knowledge, the places of God and what God did. And they're looking for a Messiah to come, And I just... So yeah, they haven't really got it yet. There is a scripture in there where he'll say for 3 days, which a day to God is for like 1,000 years, God will wait. And I think the 2,000 years is till Jesus comes. And I think that there is a prophecy that is continuing towards 1,000-year millennium in Hosea. That's unique when you're looking at prophecy. That's in there. So. I didn't think you wanted to hear all about that too tonight, so that'd be way confusing. So, all right. Okay. Well, I thank you guys for coming.